Hello, everyone. I hope your day is going well. I am Austin Hoagland, the host of the Man Watches Sports podcast, back for the fourth episode of the show. I'm glad to be back. It is Friday afternoon here at the Zoo campus, and here we are recording another episode. I think I'm starting to get the whole grasp of this YouTube thing. I've been trying to play around with some of the stuff. You can probably notice the homepage is different, the profile picture is different, just got a banner in. I've been trying to work around with the whole YouTube thing, see what all is going to work, and hopefully things go better from here. So I hope you guys like all the new stuff with the channel. So the topics for today's show, it may be kind of shorter like last time. I only have 4 topics. Unfortunately, no mailbag today. So I'm sorry about that, but if you guys wanted a mailbag segment, please drop some questions in the comments below, anything, and I will answer them on the next episode of the podcast. All right, so our first topic is going to be the Patriots versus the Chiefs, previewing that matchup there. My second topic is going to be about my NFL power rankings going into week 4. My third topic is going to be about the Miami Heat, what's going on with them, the negatives mainly. And then how the 76ers ruin the process will be our final topic, and then we will conclude. So let's go into the first segment. Don't watch the Patriots versus the Chiefs before watching this video. Listen, I know a decent amount about this game. I'd say I have some pretty good knowledge about what all the moving pieces are in this game, and I promise you that I'm going to detail what exactly should or could go on in this game on Sunday. So this is going to be a preview of the Kansas City Chiefs versus the New England Patriots. This is a battle between the two of the top teams in the AFC so far. The Patriots weren't exactly expected to be, towards the top of the AFC this season, but they've proven themselves so far. And the Chiefs, they were Super Bowl winners last year, and they've continued to be dominant so far. So let's see how exactly they match up and what the prediction is for this game. So last week, New England ran for 250 yards against the Las Vegas Raiders, and it was led by Sony Michel. Sony Michel had a really good game, and it's really nice to see Michel back. He has an injury history, but he's proven to be an immensely valuable asset for the Patriots when he's on the fields. He's probably their best single-handed running back, I'd say. He's the best guy to kind of carry the rushing load, and he didn't really have to do that. He didn't exactly go for a star running back amount of touches in this game, and yet he still was phenomenal. On top of that, the Chiefs will be missing L'Jarius Sneed, one of their top corners this season, and they could be without Chris Jones. We'll have to look at the injury report today, but, they were in limited. Well, L'Jarius Sneed is on IR, so he'll definitely be out for this game. But Chris Jones had limited practice so far this week, and he suffered a groin injury against the Ravens on Monday Night Football. If the defensive line of the Kansas City Chiefs loses Chris Jones, there may not be enough pressure to get to Cam to stop Michel, Burkhead, and company from running their way to victory. Chris Jones is probably the best defensive player for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's really good at pressuring the quarterback. That's what he's most known for. But I feel like he's stepped up his run-stopping game in the last year or so, and he looked pretty good at it so far this year. So if they lose him, that's a big loss for this game. That said, KC looked absolutely dominant against the Ravens, while New England could not put away Seattle in a close game. Now, that Seattle Patriots game was week 2. It wasn't week 3, so maybe a bad comparison because you could just say that the Chiefs struggled to put the Chargers away, which is also true. But the Patriots actually lost that game to the Seahawks, and I can't blame them too much for losing to probably the second best team in football. But it wasn't a great, loss that they took, and Cam just couldn't make a good throw. And we saw that against the Cowboys as well with the Seahawks. So that's kind of funny. But if the Patriots get behind and are forced to throw the ball more, it is going to put a lot of pressure on their young receivers in Cam Newton. You see, I think some of the reason that New England has worked so well so far is that Cam Newton has not been asked to do as much. In Carolina, he was really asked to do a lot, and you might be questioning that, thinking about Christian McCaffrey and his impact on the Panthers. But you got to remember, this guy, the only time that the Panthers made a good run in the postseason is Cam Newton's MVP year. Like the year that he took on a lot of the offensive load. And, you can't really remember the pieces around him for that whole run. He didn't have amazing receivers or a great running back, that season. It wasn't that great for the Panthers. And I think Cam Newton has been asked to do a little bit less with the Patriots. Obviously this last week he wasn't asked to do that much. He was only asked to throw the ball 28 times in their big victory over the Raiders, and he threw an interception in those 28 passes. You can't really expect Cam to put the team on his back like that. He's just not one of those quarterbacks. And I don't fault him for that. I still really love Cam Newton, and I think he's a really good quarterback. But at the same time, like he's not that guy. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Deshaun Watson. He's not one of those guys where he puts a team on his back to win games. At least not really with the Patriots. They rely a lot on their defense, their running game, and Cam has just been able to be a game manager, which is really good for him because he might be one of the best game managers, ever at this point if he continues this way for the Patriots, just because of how versatile he is on the field. He can run the ball, he can use his legs, he can get outside the pocket. He can make big throws if you ask him to as well. We saw in that Seahawks game in week 2, he made some big throws and he was really good. It was one of his best passing games ever. But if he has to throw the ball like 40, 50 times, I don't trust him to not throw an interception, really. And the Chiefs are going to be good at capitalizing on those mistakes, it feels like. Which is funny because, the Patriots are known for their ability to capitalize on mistakes. So the Chiefs have to limit that. They have to be consistent. They have to play like they played against the Ravens. They can't let up any turnovers. They can't make any bad throws. They can't get behind early. It's all up to the Chiefs and how they approach this game. If Cam does not throw the ball like he did against Seattle, it may spell doom for the Patriots, It's really up to him and what he can do on the field. And I have faith in Cam Newton that he'll have a good game. But to say that he will carry the Patriots to a win against the Kansas City Chiefs, I think we may be asking a little bit too much from him. Mahomes is coming off of his best game of the season so far, and he may carry that momentum into this game. You remember he had about, I believe, 5 touchdowns total, 4 passing, 1 rushing, and he didn't throw an interception. He looked fantastic. This is the Patrick Mahomes we know, made some really good throws, especially later in the game. And, Mahomes was just on fire. And if he resumes that form against the Patriots, who are a good defense, don't get me wrong, but they're not the Ravens defense, it could still spell a lot of trouble and a long day for Bill Belichick, Cam Newton, and the rest of the team. Clyde Edwards-Helaire really remains the X factor, not only just for this game, but for the Kansas City Chiefs season in general. We've seen him show glimpses of star potential a lot, especially in game 1. You think back to the season opener against the Texans, and he made a lot of good plays. He was really consistent. He had over 100 yards. But over the last few weeks, he's looked pretty decent. He's all right. He's all right. But he hasn't gotten the production that matches the potential just yet. And I think that he could, but, he's been inconsistent so far. So I'm not 100% sure on Edwards-Helaire and his impact on this game. I think he'll have a few decent runs here and there, but I don't think that they'll ask the world of him, and I don't think that would be a good idea to ask the world of him, especially when you have all the other weapons that you do on this team. So, my prediction for this game and what I think will happen based off of all this information, I believe it's going to be the Kansas City Chiefs beating out the New England Patriots in a somewhat close game. It's easy to predict a blowout based on last week's game against the Ravens, but I think the Patriots will play the Chiefs better, and I'm going to predict that it will be a one-score game in favor of the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's everything for my don't watch this little segment with the Patriots and Chiefs. But we are still going to stick to football. Next up is the NFL Power Rankings for Week 4. So I'm going to give you my Elite 8 teams in the NFL, the 8 teams that I believe are the best in the National Football League, and I have extensive reasoning to why. It might be a longer segment, but we'll see. Here are my top 8 teams in the NFL. At number 8 is the Los Angeles Rams. Now, they just edged out the Cardinals for this spot as both teams just lost this past weekend. Both teams are 2-1. Since the Rams lost to the better team in the Bills, they are rewarded with this placement. You see, the Rams were actually down 28-3 to the Bills, and they managed to come back and put in a really good game towards, the second half, and they came up just short. But since the Bills are the better team, I'm going to give the Rams this number 8 spot. They managed to have a great running game with guys that nobody has heard the names of before this season. Darrell Henderson was the latest to have a great rushing game in Week 3 against the Bills. Goff looks confident, and this team is talented. Now, you see with the Rams, the guys that nobody's heard of. You're thinking of Akers and Darrell Henderson. Guys that aren't named Todd Gurley are putting up consistent rushing production for this Rams team, and they should be really happy about that because with really consistent running performances allowed Goff to, play more comfortably, which is what he needs. He needs to have pieces around him. I think Goff's one of those quarterbacks that he needs pieces around him. And we're not even going to start to mention the pieces on this defense that could make big plays. I think they're a decently scary team, and I'm sure that we'll see them in the postseason. At number 7, I have the New England Patriots. Even without an incredible performance last week, they managed to dominate the Raiders due to their mistakes. You see, the Las Vegas Raiders had a lot of fumbles in this last game, and so if you just looked at the box score, you'd be like, how in the world did New England win this game like they did? And, you really have to watch the game to kind of see what exactly happened and why the New England Patriots dominated that game. And that's the thing, though. The Patriots are amazing at capitalizing off of other teams' mistakes. Cam didn't look incredible, but he didn't have to be. That's the good thing right there. We're seeing the resurgence of Sony Michel, which is very scary for the AFC. Bill Belichick is leading another team potentially into the playoffs, and they may just make a good run. They're one of the best coached teams in the league, obviously, with Bill Belichick being their head coach. They have that going for them. They have Sony Michel going for them. They have the rest of their running core going for them. I mean, this Patriots team has a lot of good pieces. There's a few big holes of weakness. You look at their receiving core. Obviously, without Mohamed Sanu on the roster, it's not very good for them. You look at some of their defense, and you're like, they're okay, but they're not elite guys. But can all those pretty good guys come together to make a great defense? Of course. I think that the Patriots will make the playoffs this year, and I think that they'll have a good test this weekend, obviously, against the Kansas City Chiefs. At number 6, I have the Baltimore Ravens. It may seem like a harsh drop from the number 1 spot last week, but the Ravens had a putrid performance against the Chiefs. Let's keep it honest here. They will probably not lose another game like this again in the regular season, but it does spell trouble for them and reminds them of their kryptonite. That's what Lamar Jackson called the Chiefs. He called them their kryptonite, their weakness. And there's going to be a few teams that won't be as dynamic, but they will be close to that. If they face a team, let's say they make it to the Super Bowl and they face the Seahawks, I don't think they would really have a chance of winning that game because the Seahawks have a dynamic offense and the Ravens have trouble stopping that. They have trouble stopping really, really good teams. Those seemingly amazing defensive pieces looked lost last week, and they're going to have to coach better to stand a chance at going to the Super Bowl and winning it. I believe some of that was on coaching against the Chiefs. I kind of detailed this on a different, segment of the podcast, but, I don't think they coached a great game, and you might get onto my back for saying that because they have a good coaching core, but it wasn't good, and I think they made some mistakes in their scheme, and they shouldn't have stuck to blitzing on third down because Mahomes pretty much took advantage of it every time. It wasn't good. Marcus Peters needs to step up as he got cooked last week. He looked like Xavier Rhodes did last year. I mean, it was burnt toast everywhere on the field. It wasn't good for an all-pro cornerback. They need to show that they can come back from adversity and be an even better team. We've seen that in the face of adversity, the Ravens haven't exactly stepped up so far, and they're going to need to show that if they want to be considered the favorite to win the Super Bowl this year. At number 5, we're continuing our AFC streak here of 3 teams. It is the Tennessee Titans. It's hard to really tell how good the Titans are, I know that they're 3-0, but I am not like 100% confident in this pick and saying they're a top 5 team. They can beat you in a variety of ways, and it seems that Ryan Tannehill may be better than we gave him credit for. He didn't have a good game this last week, but Tannehill looks really good, and he looks better than he did with the Dolphins. I think that coaching has something to do with that. He has Vrabel now in Tennessee, and he has a team that's built to his strengths, and it doesn't ask him to do that much. So, but I think that Tannehill is talented, and if he needs to step up in some games, I think he will. Derrick Henry is probably still the most dominant running back in the NFL, and as long as he's cooking, the Titans win. I have a stat for you real quick. They are undefeated in games where he rushes for 100-plus yards. That is crazy. They don't lose when he goes off. And yes, you could say that's reliant. That's being reliant on Derrick Henry. But at the same time, I mean, he's your biggest point in the offense. Why not? I mean, every team is reliant on their best pieces. And Derrick Henry is the best player on the Tennessee Titans. It's obvious. This is a team that is coming off of an AFC championship appearance where they lost to the team that won it all. They look like they're determined to make it back, which is crazy. I thought they might have a little bit of trouble rebounding from losing such a pivotal game, and they made a statement, but it didn't exactly stick like it should have. And if Derrick Henry continues his form, there may be no teams who can stop it. I could see them making it back to the AFC Championship. I don't know if a Super Bowl appearance is something that we can expect from them, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, which has to give a lot of credit to the Titans, Mike Vrabel, Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill, and of course their defense. I really like this Titans team, but I'm not 100% sure on where they stand. That is why they stand at the number 5 spot. And the last stop on our AFC streak is number 4, the Buffalo Bills. So the Bills are starting to prove that they can beat talented teams. They won a close game against the Rams, but it shouldn't have been close. That is why they're going to stand in this number 4 spot. They might have been higher. They might have been number 3 if they didn't exactly blow that lead and it was a dominant victory over the Rams. But they kind of let it slip away from them. In the end, Josh Allen saves them, and he's proving why he's a really good quarterback. He's an MVP candidate this year. I'm really happy for Josh Allen. I like him. I always liked him coming out of the draft. But, they didn't convincingly beat the Rams. They kind of let it slip away from them, and they managed to pull it together at the last moment. That is why they're going to stick in this number 4 spot. It looks like they finally have a guy who can lead this team. They've had a consistently great defense, and, their coach is really good. So they've just been looking for that guy. And it seems like Josh Allen is the guy, the quarterback, the leader on this team who's going to take them into, the second round of the playoffs, hopefully. They've been struggling to make it to being considered a consistently great team. They made it to the playoffs last year and they had a good performance, but they came up short. And we're going to have to ask ourselves what's going to happen this year in the postseason. And I'm really intrigued to see, because if Josh Allen comes out and he starts firing in the playoffs, we might have to look at this man with a different lens, because so far, I'm impressed, but I got to see him do it when it matters the most. They have a fun and interesting receiving core with Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, and John Brown, and they probably have the best cornerback in the league in Tre'Davious White. It's Tre'Davious, Jalen Ramsey. You think of those guys. They may be the story of the season, and I don't know what we should expect from them in the playoffs, that is. I expect them to make the playoffs and maybe get out of the wild card round. We'll see how everything matches up, how they look a little bit later in the season. But I am impressed with the Bills so far, and I like them. At number 3, I have the Green Bay Packers. It's hard to say new things about the Packers and Aaron Rodgers. They are a great team inside and out. Rodgers has sometimes had to carry teams on his back to even make it to the postseason and make runs, but this clearly is not one of those teams at all. All of the defensive drafting and pieces that they've been building for this team have finally paid off. It seems like they have a well-built team, a team that is consistent, a team that is whole. You have guys playing well from every position, it feels like. And that's been something they've been struggling to find over the last few years. It's felt like, Rodgers has played pretty well, but not, MVP-like. And so, since his team isn't amazing, they can't really make any big runs. And it feels like he's being asked to do less, which only means that they've been better, because he can take his time and make the right plays without worrying as much. You look at the best decision makers in the NFL, and it is hard not to pick Aaron Rodgers as number 1. I mean, this guy is incredible at making the right play. Some people rag on him for really throwing the ball away or taking a check down, but it's led to success, and he's a winner. And his team is winning right now, so I don't think you can hate on him for that. They may win the NFC this year. I'm really happy with where the Packers are right now, and I think that they are a really good team. At number 2, I have the Seattle Seahawks. So why does this team stay number 2 as the Ravens drop down? The Seahawks showed a bit of weakness by almost losing to the Dallas Cowboys. Now let me explain myself, because they still did win, and they made a clutch play. So what was the weakness there? If Dak makes a better throw, that game is going to overtime, and the Seahawks may lose to a team that has been inconsistent at best. The Seahawks have been in close games with really good teams. I mean, I wouldn't consider the Cowboys a really good team, but, it wasn't terrible. They're not a bad team. They have a lot of talent. Dak threw for almost 500 yards, which is unacceptable for any quarterback. Doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter how good Dak is at, assembling all of those passing yards every week, it feels like. I need to see more out of their coverage guys, and more than big plays and interceptions. They have to make plays, just the simple ones, shutting guys down. make the bad away. Don't always go for the big play. It's not always the best option. They're my pick to make it out of the NFC. I still think they're amazing. I think they're a really good team. I think Russell Wilson is still the MVP this year. This week they play the Dolphins, and that should be light work for them. So I expect them to at least stay at number 2 here unless something extremely drastic happens. Now, at number 1, could have probably guessed it by now, it is the Kansas City Chiefs. It feels great to be able to put this team at the number 1 spot. When you look as dominant as the Chiefs did against the supposed number 1 team in the NFL last week, you deserve this placement. I hyped the Ravens up. I told you they were really good, and they didn't play like it. Let's keep it honest. I was wrong about the Ravens, that they had no weaknesses. But the Chiefs managed to pick out weaknesses that nobody else had been able to find and take advantage. And they ended up beating the Ravens soundly. So we have to give them their credit for that. The Chiefs are looking like they have figured it out and have found ways to work around the weaknesses that they showed in the first 2 weeks. Especially in week 2, they showed weakness against the Chargers. But it looks like that was just a temporary thing. They look like they have figured it out. And their one weakness that we can say for the Chiefs, because every team pretty much has a weakness, it remains their run defense, which I've talked about a little bit. But they can change that once they get personnel like Mike Pennell back on the roster. They already have Chris Jones, who's getting better at defending the run, and we just need to see their edge guys kind of, make plays, and, maybe their linebackers kind of step up and read the running back a little bit better and where exactly he's going to go. But I expect them to probably stay at this number 1 spot for a little bit longer, and I think that they're going to beat the Patriots this week. Very happy about the Kansas City Chiefs, and they are my number 1 team in the NFL. That is everything for my NFL Power Rankings this week, my Elite 8 teams. I hope you guys enjoyed that. So, we are moving on to the third segment of the day, and we're getting into basketball. Here is the harsh truth about the Miami Heat. So the Miami Heat are down 1-0 to the Lakers after Game 1. It was a blowout loss where after the first quarter, it was all Lakers. In the first quarter, the Miami Heat actually jumped out to a pretty sizable lead, and it looked really good for them. Jimmy Butler was cooking, and it looked like the Lakers couldn't really figure out what they were doing. But after the first quarter, the Lakers surged, and it was no looking back from there. The Lakers defense looked dominant, shutting down guys like Duncan Robinson, who play a big role in the scoring for this Heat team. If you actually look at the box score, Duncan Robinson scored a nothing burger, 0 points for this Miami Heat team, which is ridiculous. We expect a lot more out of him. We've compared this guy to Klay Thompson, and he has not played like anywhere near that level, of course. Tyler Hero is a great kid with a lot of potential, but he looked horrible defensively during Game 1, finishing with one of the worst plus-minuses for a single game in finals history. We need to see more out of him. Look, I know he's not a great perimeter defender, and he probably never will be, but you can work on your mechanics, and you can work on your scheme and playing it better and making the right plays. He's not being asked to do an extreme amount. It's not like he's being asked to guard LeBron for that much time. We've seen him guard him on a play or two, but, he's being asked to guard guys like KCP and Danny Green. And, he just has to close out better and make better plays. Jimmy Butler kind of had to step up and carry this team like he was LeBron, but we know he is not that guy. I love Jimmy Butler, but he's just not the superstar that carries their team. He never has been, and he never will be. Now, will he make clutch plays for a team? Will he be a leader for a team? Yes. But is he LeBron level? Is he KD level? Can he carry a team? I don't think so. Bam Adebayo and Goran Dragic got injured and are doubtful for Game 2 tonight. That is extremely worrying for Miami Heat fans, for the coaches. If Bam is out, he won't be able to play help defense on Anthony Davis, which just leaves Jay Crowder to guard Anthony Davis. I mean, because that was kind of their strategy. We've noticed that. They would have Jay Crowder guard Anthony Davis, then they would have Bam Adebayo come around on help defense. It didn't really work in Game 1, but it is a good strategy, and I don't think it was a bad move from the Heat to do that. But now that Bam is out, who is going to guard Anthony Davis that isn't named Jay Crowder? That's not good. AD put up 34 points last game, even with Bam in for a decent amount of time. That is scary. That is worrying if you're the Miami Heat. Who is going to stop Anthony Davis? Who do you have on your roster, and what schemes can you run? Do you just run zone defense, or do you switch it up, run man sometimes? Are you going to double team? Those are the questions they have to ask themselves. Eric Spoelstra has to kind of figure out what's going on and what they're going to do. LeBron had a great performance, but I feel as if he still has another level to reach. I think that he's going to get there eventually, right? And it may be Game 3, it may be Game 4, or later if they get to that amount of games. But I think LeBron could play better. He had a good box score game, and he had a good eye test game, I feel like, but he wasn't incredible. He's not the guy that we know. And at this point, is he the Finals MVP? AD played pretty well. So, we'll have to see. The problem with the Miami Heat is just as I expected, and many others expected. Star power. I talked about this last time. When you rely on great role players like Duncan Robinson to score a bunch of points, it won't work every night against an amazing defensive team. You may point to the Bucks and be like, they're an amazing defensive team and they made it work. But that's a different style of defense, and they ran into potentially a team with a better defense. I know that might be crazy for me to say the Lakers are better defensively than the Bucks, but just by the eye test, it kind of looks like it. Some of their role players, like Kendrick Nunn, did have decent games, and I think we're going to see all of them step up at some point. I don't think Duncan Robinson is going to score 0 points for this whole series. And I don't think Tyler Hero is going to have a terrible plus-minus for the entire series. But I don't know if they're all going to step up at the same time, which is a question mark, and one that is huge for the Miami Heat and one that they should think about, right? Jimmy Butler may have to score and play better offensively than he ever has at this season if they want a chance. He's going to have to be that offensive guy, which he's not used to being. And that may take away from his defense that he plays on guys like LeBron. Of course, it's still just one game. Let's keep that in mind. But it doesn't look great for the Heat, especially due to their injuries. We still haven't seen most of the Lakers' role players step up either. I mean, Danny Green hasn't shot well. Kyle Kuzma only had 3 points in this last game. We only really saw one role player for the Lakers that stepped up and looked great, and that was Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. KCP was really the only role player to have a really good game, and he's been the Lakers' third best player at times, which is crazy to think about because they have guys like Kuzma, because they have guys like Rondo, bigger names. You don't think of, when you think of the Lakers, you don't think of KCP, but he's really been a good guy for them lately, and I expect him to have a good series this series. The Miami Heat team, no matter what, have had an incredible run and deserve all the love that they've gotten. They beat the Milwaukee Bucks pretty soundly. They beat the Boston Celtics pretty soundly. They swept the Pacers. This team was looked at as a dark horse, but they played like they were the favorite, and that's crazy. I know that the narratives are going to fly around that this Lakers team had an easy path to winning a championship and to the finals, and that this Heat team really wasn't as good as people hyped them up to be, and they were a fifth seed. But if you look at how they played, and if you look at the stats, and if you look at with your eyes and you watch the games, you can't tell me that the Miami Heat have not been the best Eastern Conference team in the playoffs this season. It's not like they've gotten lucky to be where they are. They've played extremely well, and they outplayed and outcoached the other teams. They weren't getting lucky with injuries. They just played well, and it's just simple. This Miami Heat team is good, really good, and we can't take anything away from them. Jimmy Butler has proven so much, and he's definitely shown he's a winner. You know, there have been doubts around Jimmy Butler's reputation because of the way that he's demanded to be traded from the Timberwolves, and he had trouble in the locker room with those guys, and the way that he left Philadelphia, and the way that he had trouble in the locker room with those guys. But I don't think that we can put the blame on him. He wants to win. He's a leader. He's a winner. And he showed that he can do that by himself as the sole star of a team. Miami could be a potential free agent destination, but their salary cap situation may not be the best after having to re-sign their young guys. You know, we will look more into the Heat's situation after the finals concludes and what they can do to get better, or, how then maybe they beat the Lakers, but we'll see. I think that the Lakers have this series wrapped up. I know it's been one game, but with all the injuries and the way that the Lakers look and the way that the Heat look, I just don't think that the Heat have enough star power to win this game and win the series. But we'll find out tonight on Game 2, won't we? So that's everything for the Miami Heat. Let's move on to our last topic of the day. This is how the 76ers ruined the process. Just recently, the Philadelphia 76ers hired a brand new head coach in Doc Rivers, who just got fired or parted ways from the Los Angeles Clippers. You see, the Sixers have been struggling to have any playoff success over the last few years, ever since they've really gotten to the playoffs. They lost this year in the first round to the Celtics in a sweep, and they didn't look good at all. Their loss was without Ben Simmons, which we have to keep in mind, but it is doubtful that he would have led the Sixers to winning that series. Now, do I think they take a game or two with Ben Simmons actually playing in the lineup against the Boston Celtics? Yes, I think that they put up more of a fight there. But does he win the series for the Sixers? I doubt it. This team may have to consider retooling the roster, but let's ask the question, how did it get to this point? How did the Sixers get to a point where every season before it begins, we look at this team and say that they might be the number one seed in the Eastern Conference, and then they get promptly eliminated? So almost everyone remembers how not that long ago in the early 2010s, the 76ers were tanking. You think of Sam Hinkie, you think of trust the process. And this is exactly what they would do every year. They would lose every year. And then they would draft a few young guys. And then they would trade other guys on their roster for picks so that they could be bad again the next year. And the cycle continues. You see, they would get guys like Drew Holiday, and then they would trade him for picks. They didn't really know who their guys were. And if they would have kept around some of these guys, maybe they'd be in a better situation now. Eventually, they ended up with two star players, Joel Embiid from Kansas and Ben Simmons from LSU. Now, these two individually on paper should be leading a team to a conference finals appearance, but all of their problems are more nuanced than that, because we're not talking about NBA on paper. We're talking about NBA in action and what happens on the floor. Embiid may be the most fragile human on the planet. He seems to get injured multiple times every year, and only in the playoffs does he actually go ahead and play a majority of the games. He gets injuries almost everywhere on his body. It feels like every day we hear something on the injury report about Joel and how he's questionable or doubtful or even out for 3 to 4 games, and then he comes back and he has really good performances. Because when he is in the game, he's usually one of the best big men in the NBA. I mean, it's crazy. He's dominant on both sides of the court. He's really good defensively. Maybe the best defensive center in the league that has decent offense. Because if you think about it, you may say Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz. But he's a force on both ends of the court, and his only weakness is his meh ball handling and his inability to really develop a perimeter shot. Of course, he's taking them and he's making them at an okay clip, but it's never been a strength of his, obviously. And guys don't really go out to the perimeter to guard him. Which, speaking of, we're going to get into the biggest problem with the 76ers. Because normally, his lack of shooting for a big man is not a problem in the NBA. Because there's a concept called spacing. You see, the big man, the center, is going to play right next to the paint. He's going to be inside, right by the hoop. And then spaced out around the perimeter, we're going to see guys, the rest of the team, waiting on the perimeter, waiting for either Joel to take it one-on-one against the guy in the paint and make a shot in the post, or some guy comes to double team him and he manages to kick out to a shooter on the perimeter and they get a good wide open shot. But with the 76ers, they lack shooting. Now, when I say this, most people, they just like to focus on Ben Simmons, but if you look at their entire team, there's not really that great of shooting. I mean, name me one guy who his biggest strength is his shooting. The one guy you can probably tell me is Furkan Korkmaz. But Furkan Korkmaz cannot be your only shooter on the team that desperately needs shooting. On top of that, Ben Simmons is really bad at shooting. He shoots worse from 3 than I do. And I play basketball about once every month. And yet my shot looks better than Ben Simmons does. And that is a problem. And everyone's discussed this. I know it's been done to death. The whole Ben Simmons can't shoot thing. But he can't. And it doesn't help them at all. They paid an exorbitant amount of money for Tobias Harris when they should have been focused on keeping Jimmy Butler. And Jimmy Butler leaves, and it's not good for them. Because now they're stuck with Tobias Harris, who's making a lot of money, but he hasn't been playing nearly as good as Jimmy Butler has. And then they gave the big bucks to the oldest man in the entire universe, Al Horford. Al Horford has not gelled well with this team. And the Sixers would do anything to get him off the books. I mean anything. Now, when discussing trades for the 76ers, you may be wondering who are good pieces to throw in. And I have one that is a really good piece. Somebody that they could look at and kind of be like, this is the guy who we have to include in a trade. Because potentially that's our way to get off of one of these big contracts. And potentially get somebody who can shoot the ball from outside of 5 feet from the basket. That guy is Josh Richardson. Now, Josh Richardson recently played for the Heat, and this was I believe his first year for the 76ers. But he doesn't make that much money, and he's a good player, especially defensively, and he could be a really good starting caliber or sixth man for a lot of good teams. So maybe somebody's willing to take on an Al Horford contract or a Tobias Harris contract if they can also get Josh Richardson, a really good young guy. Now, who could they be looking to target with Josh Richardson and Al Horford and Tobias Harris? I don't know. I don't really know. And I don't think that they should immediately move off of Tobias Harris Despite popular opinion, I think they should be more focused on getting rid of Al Horford because Horford is aging like a rock, a sedimentary rock. The guy is not going to be able to play in 2 years, it feels like, at this rate. The Sixers may be desperate to bring in a guy who is most known for choking in the playoffs. Of course, I'm talking about Doc Rivers. He's blown a lot of leads, and he's not exactly known for his fantastic runs in the playoffs. Exactly. So we have to kind of look at that and be like, is he really going to be the guy for the Sixers? Is he? So what moves will they make now? Only time will tell. I could see them making some kind of big trade because a lot of teams are looking to move off of guys, and maybe they can turn that into something. Maybe they can turn another team's desperation into a way to get out of their desperate situation. The Sixers are going to have to look at a lot of things this offseason. They've already gotten the coaching decision out of the way, so now they need to focus on their personnel and what exactly they want to do with Embiid and Simmons moving forward. Are they going to keep both of them? Are they going to focus on getting shooters around them? What's the move here? And that's the question that they're going to have to ask themselves. The 76ers ruined the process, but there's still time for it to be rebuilt. All right, so that's everything I have for today's show. It's probably the shortest show in Man Watches Sports history, but I could really only like 4 topics that I came up with, and I hope that you guys enjoyed them as well. Thank you for watching another episode of the Man Watches Sports podcast. It has been really fun recording, editing, and promoting all these videos and figuring out exactly what I want to do with this YouTube channel and how to grow it and what's the best moves. But I hope that you all have a wonderful day. I have been your host, Austin Hoagland, and I am signing off. Peace.